Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, I'm delighted to have back Steve Weinberg, an acclaimed sales expert who has closed over $500 million in new business throughout his career. If you joined us previously, you'll remember his book, Above Quota Performance, which has helped thousands of sales pros and entrepreneurs crush their revenue targets. Now, as we look ahead to 2025, Steve is here to share the newest trends, strategies, and game changing insights for business entrepreneurs who want to thrive in our rapidly evolving world. So, Steve, welcome back.
Thanks, Deb. I'm delighted to be back.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. Steve, so much has changed in the business landscape since we last spoke. What are the biggest new developments or shifts in sales and entrepreneurship that you're seeing as we head into 2025?
Well, one of the things I hear a lot from salespeople and entrepreneurs is I wish things would go back to how it was before the pandemic. And the reality is that's not going to happen.
No.
So the changes that have occurred since then are permanent and we're not going back. So that's both fortunate and unfortunate. I think Uh, we've seen in the last year or two a shift in the buying cycle to be more buyer centric as opposed to seller centric. So the buyers are more in charge right now, and uh, and sellers it's much more difficult. We have less access to the sellers now. They do a lot of their own research before they call us in, and once we're in, they do limit our access to different people within the organizations. Where in the past, I know I was able to contact several people in the organization to find out more information and and gain insights into their strategies. Well, now the amount of information that sellers are willing to give has become a lot less available to salespeople. So it's made our jobs much more difficult. I think that's been a problem. Another shift has been, and I talk about this in my new book, the millennials have taken over. So the millennials are now running many of the organizations that we sell to. And a recent Gartner survey, Gartner, the research organization, said that 44% of the millennials don't really even want to involve salespeople in their buying decisions. They would much rather do it themselves. And overall, that number is 33%. In the past, that number may have been 5 or 10%. So that's been a really drastic change, and that has a great effect on both entrepreneurs and salespeople. I think we've seen a lot of changes in that companies have gone to more of digital channels. They're very A lot of them are very content to not have any interaction with salespeople. And when you call them up and you say, I'd like you to take a look at this great product I have, they tell you to go to their website, enter the information in on it, and they'll get back to you. And then usually when they get back to you, they say, "Well, give me a price quote." So it's again, you have very little time to spend with them. And to me, one of the significant areas that a salesperson needs to be able to be adept with is to build value with a buyer, and this really limits our ability to do that.
Yeah, so it's more at the beginning of the cycle and more online, like you have to build that value before they ever even get to you sometimes.
Yes, yeah, a lot of times if you've gotten to that point, it's too late.
Yeah.
And I personally didn't like to be involved in commodity sales. If people were buying light bulbs, or if they were buying carpeting, or if they were buying paper, like computer paper, stuff like that, or cardboard, what you buy from company A and company B and company C is really only determined by price difference. And I wanted to be a salesperson that didn't operate in that environment.
Well, in chapter 2 of your book, you talk about something you call the edge, which I really like since our summit is literally about unlocking that edge. Um, what can you tell us about, in that chapter two, you say, what is the edge? And how can entrepreneurs develop it and stand out in today's competitive market?
Well, what I refer to as getting more information and using that information from the seller. Now, I've just said it's harder to do that. So now we have to do it on our own. So we need to do our own research. We need to comb through whatever's available publicly. If there's an annual report, I have found the annual reports to be just a wealth of knowledge into what the strategies and the tactics are for a company. For example, are they introducing a new product line? Are they going into new markets? Are they going into more global markets? These are things that could be very important to them, and when I'm trying to sell to them, it may be a clue that I need. So when I talk about the edge, it really means you need to have something as a seller that your competitors don't have, and that really is knowledge. And and the knowledge is only going to come from the work that the salesperson actually does. Very few companies will volunteer this. They won't say to you, here's a piece of paper with everything you need to know to sell to us. I was in sales a long time, and I never had that happen. So we have to develop that on our own. And another thing to me, as far as the edges, is the confidence of the salesperson. And I just posted an article on LinkedIn in the middle of February about that. I always felt when I called on someone that I was going to win the sale. And that was my mindset. It was just a matter of me just going through the steps that were required, sequentially or non-sequentially in order to get the sale. But my mind was always, I am going to win this sale. Well, what I've seen today are a lot of people are so worried about their ability to do that, they don't have a positive mental attitude going in.
Hmm.
And I think buyers can sense that. I know I sense it when I deal with people, whether they have confidence or not. So I think that's important as well. And I think that does give you the edge. It helps give you the edge.
Well, in your book, you have everyone lives by selling something right at the very beginning of your book. So
Absolutely.
we're all salespeople, aren't we?
That's right. I mean, anybody in any organization, I know my last CEO, he made a statement to everybody at a company meeting is that everybody's in sales. So he asked everybody in sales to stand up at the beginning of the meeting, and a few people stood up. And then he said, everybody in sales, please stand up, and a couple more. And then finally, people understood in the room, and everybody stood up. And he said, that's what I wanted to see. So that's important. Everybody is in sales, whether you're working in the shipping dock or whether you're answering the phone or you're a receptionist when someone walks in the door.
Mhm.
Everybody's in sales. Even if you're in accounting, you're in sales.
Even at home.
Even at home. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Well, from supply chain disruptions to accelerated pace and tech advancements, entrepreneurs face a wide array of obstacles. How would you define the top challenges that service-based business owners need to overcome right now to stay competitive?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have less access to buyers. That's a real challenge.
Hmm.
So we can't just say, okay, this is how it is, and we're not going to do anything about it, right? So what we need to do is devise ways to gain access to people that are perhaps unwilling to give us that. And there are a lot of different ways of doing that. I like to use LinkedIn as a way of introduction and building networks, but
Hmm.
also, and I used this yesterday with somebody, linking to somebody so that I could have a conversation with another person. So using that, and then I think it's important that a salesperson demonstrates that they're bringing value to the person, to the buyer, by bringing value, bringing knowledge, telling them about their industry, whatever, some new developments that they may or may not know, what their competitors are doing. For example, you know,
Hmm.
I I sometimes would say to somebody, "Are you aware that your competitor is now doing this, this, and this?" And they would say no, and I'd say, "Well, now they are." So the more value that a person brings to the buyer, the more they distinguish themselves from their competition. I think it's clear that it's tougher to influence the buying decision now because the buyers won't let us. So we have to figure out ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important. Always, it's been important for salespeople to establish trust with buyers. I think it's even more so now. And there are some things that can be done that will totally destroy trust, and salespeople need to avoid that as well as entrepreneurs. So they need to be very, for example, very honest and forthcoming with them. Keep all appointments and just help them out. If they're what they have won't help the buyer, then they need to tell them that. They need to tell them that, and then tell them that maybe there'll be another opportunity another time. But don't
Yeah.
try to sell them something they don't need because that'll destroy trust right away.
Yeah, I think that is definitely, and then look at the process to see, maybe there's something you could have done on the front end that wouldn't have brought them to you. But when you get to that point and you find out that what you have is not for them, then that is awesome that you just tell them, this is not for you, and not try to just sell somebody just to be selling somebody.
Right, and explain to them why.
Yeah.
Uh, I've had it instance happen in the past for me as well, where I came to a conclusion that this was not going to be a good fit,
Mhm.
and in some cases it could be a support nightmare. And who really wants an unhappy customer? I
Right.
don't want one, and I don't
Yeah.
think many entrepreneurs or salespeople want to deal with them. So one way to avoid that is don't sell them something they don't need.
Yeah. That's good. Well, then that kind of brings us right into like the digital marketplace and how it's more crowded and sophisticated than ever. What key strategies or tools do you recommend for entrepreneurs to cut through the noise and reach their ideal clients effectively? You mentioned LinkedIn, which they should also connect with you on LinkedIn.
Right, and I invite people to do that.
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in it. I was actually one of the early adopters of LinkedIn. I have been recognized by them for that. And people way back when would say to me, Steve, they're going to charge for this. Why would you sign up for it? I went, well, when they charge for it, I'll decide whether or not I want to keep using it. Well, they don't charge for it. They still don't charge for it unless you decide to upgrade to a premium package. So
Yeah.
it's a great thing. I think entrepreneurs and salespeople need to make sure that their websites are current and that their digital marketing is current, that they
Hmm.
have the right materials there, and that their website is more appealing to the marketplace. Otherwise, what people see is if they 2 or 3 clicks and they'll go somewhere else
Hmm.
because they are checking you out online, whether you realize it or not. They are doing that.
Yeah.
So I think they need to do a much better job of making sure that that is aligned with what they want to do. I think qualifying leads, they need to do a better job of that. We can talk a little bit later about how artificial intelligence can help them do that, but
Hmm.
there's something that can be done in that area as well. And another thing I think I feel important about is that if you end up in a situation where a buyer will not give you any access or next to no access at all or information, then maybe it's time to walk away. Maybe you just don't hit your head against the wall and don't try flinging different proposals at them because you're wasting a lot of valuable time. I believe time is an incredible resource for salespeople.
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of people waste a lot of time trying to sell to people that just, they won't, they don't understand that it's an investment on both sides. It's not just an investment of the salesperson's time, it's an investment on both persons' time. And if they're unwilling to do it, why should I do it?
Hmm. I like that.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, very important. Even with the best tools in techniques, entrepreneurs can still hit mental blocks or get overwhelmed by constant change. Can you share a bit about how mindset plays a role in achieving sales success in 2025 and perhaps a quick tip for recalibrating when doubt creeps in?
As I mentioned earlier, I think mindset really matters a lot. And, and as I mentioned in my LinkedIn article, people don't want to deal with Debbie Dowder. They don't want to deal with somebody that's down. They want to deal with someone that wakes up in the morning with energy. I know I did when I was selling. I wanted to go to work right away. I mean, I viewed every day as an opportunity to earn another commission. So I was eager to go to work. If people don't have their mindset, if there's a problem, and sometimes we do get overwhelmed by problems at work. Maybe we're not getting along with our manager. Maybe we're not getting along with our spouse. Maybe there are some mental health issues. Then people need to seek attention for that.
Mhm.
And in the past, it really was perhaps considered to be negative if somebody did go to and ask for help. But now it is not anymore. Now, if you need help, you should ask for it. I'm on the board of the Mental Health Association of Greater Chicago, and we can't keep up with the requests that people have for mental health information, and it's not perceived as a negative anymore. But I think the
Good.
salesperson's attitude it's got to be very positive, and if they're not positive, why isn't it positive? Maybe sales isn't for them. Maybe they need to be with a different company. Maybe they're unhappy with the product and they need to sit down and talk to their manager. But again, I think it's really important.
Yeah, important for the person and everybody around them and the customer and everybody.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, a little bit about overcoming obstacles. You're offering a guide for overcoming obstacles, something that resonates with virtually every entrepreneur. Everybody has obstacles. Can you give us a sneak peek of what's inside and how it can help our audience immediately tackle the most pressing sales or operational challenges that they're facing?
Okay, well, one of the things that I think I perhaps do a little bit differently than maybe other authors and sales trainers is that every sales training class that I went through, and I probably went through well over a dozen, would have a session in it and how to overcome objections.
Hmm.
So this is what you need to do. If the buyer does this, you do this. If the buyer does that, you do that. So I called it sales jujitsu. So this is what you had to do in order to overcome what the buyer did. My attitude is totally different. My attitude is to welcome objections. So to me, objections are clues to help you make the sale. So, for example, an objection, your price is too high. Well, tell me more about that. Why is my price too high? And maybe you're not comparing apples to apples. So rather than saying to somebody, no, my price is not too high, you're wrong. Okay.
Hmm.
My price is the same as everybody else. Now it's not what the buyer wants to hear. So in my guide, I list about a dozen or so common objections and perhaps a suggested response to those objections. But the responses will always be a drill down. Tell me more. Explain more why you're saying that, and uh, never refuting the objection, but trying to understand it. Because if they said it, first of all, the fact that they said it is a good thing.
Hmm.
Because if they never say it, then you lose the sale and you never knew what the problem was, right? I mean, that's bad. So the best thing is to elicit those objections and then try to understand them. And a lot of times it's a communication issue. So, for example, somebody might say, well, the reason why I'm not buying from you is because your solution doesn't do X, Y, Z. And I'll look at them and I'll say, oh, well, I guess I didn't explain that very well because it does. So let me take 5 minutes and explain to you how that does that. So, and a lot of times it's a communication issue. Maybe I did a bad job in sales explaining it. Maybe they were just tuned out at the time I explained it, maybe they were looking at their smartphone when I was explaining it. So, I mean, that's another challenge is having a meeting with someone when they all have their hands on their smartphones and it's dinging and they're answering questions right away. These are problems that we didn't have a few years ago, just keeping people's attention. But going back to the objections, there are things in there like, Mr. Big is not available to sign it. Well, when is he available? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
So anybody can request a copy of my guide by going onto my website or through LinkedIn. But
Mhm.
my website is www.steve, Steve Weinberg, Weinberg sales.com. And if they go there, they can request it and download it, and they'll have that to use. It's just a guide. I think it's helpful. The reaction I've received from the public has been great about it. People love it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I think part of getting better at your communication skills starts with listening, right? I mean, first you have to listen
Um,
and actually listen to what they're saying and hear what they're saying and maybe repeat it back to them so that you have a complete understanding.
as my father used to say, God gave you two eyes, two ears, and one mouth, and there was a reason for that, right? You should
Yeah.
spend more time looking and listening and less time talking.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, listening is really. People have asked me what is the number one sales skill that most salespeople fail at that they need to be better at, and my answer is always listening.
Yeah.
Just listening. That's it. It's a very simple thing to do to fix yourself and become a better listener.
Yeah. And there's a difference between hearing someone and listening to someone. So I've always been taught that.
Yeah, and another thing I tell people here's this is an exercise you should do when someone speaks to you. Don't think about your response while they're speaking. Let them finish speaking, hear what they say completely, and then wait a few seconds and then give them your response. So it's more respectful, but even better than that, you're actually learning more and listening better. Don't think about your response while they're talking.
I like that. Well, you've mentioned the importance of AI and automation tools in optimizing sales processes for service-based business entrepreneurs or who might not consider themselves tech savvy. What are the simplest ways they can integrate AI into their day-to-day operations to gain that competitive edge?
I think you actually came out with one of the best ways that I've seen it, which is your downloadable eight ways to your impact prompts as to how to use AI. I think those are wonderful, and I would encourage people to do that. For example, to use it for scheduling. That's a very simple way of doing it, or for doing it for goal setting, that kind of thing. But people need to understand that AI is a newer technology. And like all newer technologies, it will get better and better over time, that there are both positive and negative aspects to it, but it's not going away. And we should not look for the government to restrict it because that it doesn't work. I mean, it's here to stay. But the companies such as Microsoft, Google, IBM, and ChatGPT have come out with really easy to use AI features that, like ChatGPT, can be very simple to use. And I think people should try doing it.
Mhm.
So, like, I just went on ChatGPT and said, ChatGPT, please explain what ChatGPT is.
Oh,
So, and then it went through it and explained it all. So people should try that out and use it and become more comfortable with it. They don't have to learn how to code with it, but just to understand not to be intimidated by it because
mhm.
it's here and it can be a wonderful tool if used properly.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. Our audience wants both profitability and a sense of time freedom. How can entrepreneurs structure their sales strategies to scale without being consumed by the day-to-day grind? Any insights on outsourcing, team building, or systemizing sales process that lead to true flexibility?
I think people need to take a look at what their current sales model is. And it may have been something that they started using 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even longer than that. And I think they need to examine it and say, okay, is this really working for us? And if it's not working for us, how can we tweak it? Because I'm a believer in evolution, not revolution. So I don't want to take and throw the whole thing in the garbage can and start over. But maybe there's some things we need to do to help it out. So, for example, do we need to outsource lead generation? Is that something that makes sense for us? I mean, sometimes our salespeople don't like cold calling, but there are companies that'll do that for us, and we can train them and pay them, and they bring us leads. So that's an example. There are also outsourced or fractional, what they call fractional sales leaders or VP of sales. Maybe these are people that your company should use as an entrepreneur. Maybe you can't afford to have a VP of sales full time, but a fractional VP that works 2 or 3 days a week for you that can help you with sales strategies might work. Going back to the sales model, maybe you need to look as far as going, whether you should have inbound or outbound salespeople. How do what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the team that you have right now? How do you work with them to make that better? Also, understand that salespeople are much more fluid now. I guess that's the word. That they'll hop to another company if they see a better opportunity. They'll take it right away. So we need to know that. I think people need to understand the importance of lead generation. That uh, that salespeople, if they are not receiving leads from the company, and that to me is a rare occurrence, then they need to understand that they have to go out and develop them themselves. And there are ways that companies can help them. I think depending on the size of the companies, what I've seen a lot now are the larger organizations have built what they call sales enablement functions, which is really just preparing everything and to make it easier for the salespeople.
I like
And I
that.
also see salespeople waste a lot of their time on non-sales related responsibilities, and that's a common complaint that I get from salespeople all the time. I'm being burdened with all this paperwork that I have to do. It takes me forever to enter orders into our system. I've got to, do this and I've got to do that. I've got to attend meetings. I've got trainings and I've got all these things. And sometimes it can take up to 25 or 30% of their time. Well, how are they going to achieve their goals if that's the case? So there are ways that perhaps maybe have some different learning models that help the salespeople learn what they need to do, update what they need to update, but not take so much of their time.
Those are some great insights. I like that fractional VP where, maybe you only, so that fractional VP, they work for several companies. Is that how that works?
Right.
Yeah, I like
Right.
that. I
Yeah.
like that.
My former manager is now doing that. He was a great manager for me. I really enjoyed working for him. And now that he's doing that, he can spread his expertise around. It also makes it easier for him because he has a much more challenging life going, from one company to another company and helping everybody out in
Yeah.
different industries.
That is awesome. That's a great idea. I like that. And then I also like where you're talking about the just checking your whole sales process and everything, and then how maybe you are having your salespeople doing, you said 25% of these other things when they're not going to meet their sales quota. So I like where
And
you,
I found that 25% number not to be outrageous. It's the case with a lot of companies now.
yeah.
It's an extra burden that's put on the salespeople that can't, and it prevents them from achieving their goals.
So you talked about confidence and also making sure that your communication skills are better. So to get that confidence and to be better at communication skills, and that's where we need to like read books like your book, and then you have a new book, and then also like LinkedIn and reading articles and your blogs and things like that. Um, what else can we do to be, you know, just to be the best salesperson? I mean, isn't the salesperson the most paid? I mean, they're paid the most.
I'm sorry, are they paid the most?
Well,
Is
yeah,
that
or
what you-
don't they make, I mean, salespeople is like the most important of your business, but also
Right.
salespeople, if they're really good, they make a lot of money.
Yes, they do, and I believe they're well worth it because
Yeah.
they bring a lot of money to the company. And but I think it's important for salespeople to sometimes just go back to the basics and understand different sales methodologies and
Mhm.
refresh themselves on that. I'm trying to think of the name of the sales networking where you meet for breakfast and do speeches to each other. Uh,
Oh, okay. The like Toastmasters.
Toastmasters. I think it's a wonderful organization because you're amongst your peers. It's a very non-threatening environment, and you
Mhm.
can really hone your sales presentations better amongst people that will really give you good advice. I'm a big believer in Toastmasters. I haven't been to one in several years, but I did go to them and always found them to be valuable. It's a great way of getting better.
I
I
like
think
that.
salespeople also should record themselves doing presentations and then listen to them.
Hmm.
And they would be amazed when they play them back how many oohs and ahs and all these distractions that they have that they need to remove from their presentation to make
Yeah,
themselves better.
I like that. I like that. And then practice with other people in your business or
Right.
yeah, and just practice. I like that.
And I believe I'm a big believer in role playing. So I enjoy role playing, and I always felt, before a big presentation or a big contract negotiation, I would sit down and role play with either my peers or my manager as to what the scenario might be and what I might encounter, so that when it does happen, that I'm less taken back by it. I'm more prepared.
I like that. Well, what do you think the two biggest pitfalls are for salespeople not hitting their targets?
Well, as I mentioned before, not listening well.
Hmm.
And I think the other one is really not qualifying their leads correctly
Okay.
and working on the wrong opportunities. So when they get all the way done and they've invested, whether it's days, months, or years on an opportunity, then they find out later on they didn't win. Well, maybe they shouldn't have been there at all. Maybe that's the place that, and I talk about the sweet spot in my
Hmm.
book, that they should always try to find leads in the sweet spot, which is where your company's value proposition, where your competitors' weaknesses are, and what their needs, where they all intersect. And that's your greatest probability of making a sale. As you wander away from that sweet spot, your chances of making the sale decrease. It's much more difficult if they don't have the need, or if a competitor is stronger than you are in that particular area, it's going to be much more difficult for you to make the sale. So you need to get in the right space and call on the right people.
So your new book, tell us the name of your new book, but also I think your new book is more about uh, managers of teams and things like that. And in that um, book, do you help with like, I know how companies spend thousands and thousands, or I don't even know what the number is, but on sales training. And then to have they bring in people to train their sales team, and then your sales team still doesn't do it. I mean, do you see that? And then
Oh,
but
absolutely.
first tell us the name of your book and tell me a little bit more about that new book.
Well, the first book, which you referred to, above quota performance, was recently the winner of the New England Book Fair as the
Oh,
best business book.
awesome.
And then there was another runner-up, and then uh, the honorable mention in the same one was above quota sales management. So both books were winners in the New England Book Fair. So above quota sales management is mostly oriented towards sales managers, but it also has in it chapters for things like selling to millennials, because millennials are much more, there are more buyers in the millennial age group now than there ever were before. Different tips on contract negotiation, about a couple hundred tips on how to do that. And also for those people that are acquainted with the Myers-Briggs personality types, the 16 types, I
Mhm.
break down in this book here how to sell to each one. Well, first, how to identify them, because people don't come and tell you, well, I'm one of these.
Yeah.
So how do you identify them? And then how do you sell them? Because a message to, for example, to a person who is an introvert is going to be a different message to a person who's an extrovert. So
Mhm.
that's in the new book, Above Quota Sales Management. And they're both available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Awesome. And congratulations on the
Thank you.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, you've given us some fantastic insights today. For those in our audience who are ready to dive deeper, should they start with your free guide or should they grab your above quota performance book or your new book for sales teams? Could you give us a step by step? What are their next steps for anybody who wants to really knock it out of the park this year in 2025?
I think the first place to start would be to download the objection handling guide, because it's
Okay.
very simple. It's a two-pager. You can read it very quickly and then decide whether it has any value to you or not. The next place for a salesperson, I would go to above quota performance. It's been marked down to about $10 now on Amazon, so it's quite affordable. And for the sales manager, I would encourage them to go to above quota sales management. But I think people will find in there that uh, that I have not been a professional sales trainer. What I have been is a professional salesperson. So I have about 35 years of experience, and when I wrote the books, I tried to use my actual experience and what worked for me, because I was very successful. So what worked for me, and a lot of times what worked for me was very different from what the sales trainers were telling people to do.
Mhm. So you can't necessarily follow a script.
Well, I like scripts. I mean, I like scripts as a way of starting out, learning a script and then going from there and then
Okay.
varying. But I think people should learn a script to begin with, and then vary it from there. But I like the idea of it because
Yeah,
it's more
have a guideline.
uniform. Right, exactly. Yeah, just a structure to work with. And I do believe I originally was trained as an accountant, so I'm very procedural, and I believe in structure. So I believe
Mhm.
and in consistency. So I think to be good in sales, one must be consistent.
Well, and I think more people should just think of sales as a conversation, not something to be scared of. You
Right,
know,
exactly.
yeah. And as long as you're not, like you talked earlier about, as long as you're not trying to sell somebody something that they don't need, then, you are just helping them out.
Exactly.
Oh,
And that's how I viewed it. I one of the reasons why I liked sales was I liked helping people, and I still like helping people. And if somebody contacts me through LinkedIn and they have a sales question for me, I will answer those questions as best I can.
hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for all your insights. And uh, I like sales. And I know throughout all of the years, sales has probably changed, but overall, I think maybe it hasn't too. Isn't it just, networking with people, meeting people, having conversations, listening, being confident that you're helping them. And then of course, you're going to have obstacles and different things that we had talked about.
Right.
But overall, it's you're having a conversation, and like you said, you're just trying to help them with your product or your service, and that if it doesn't help them, then just say so, and and go to the next
Right.
one. Yeah, I
Well, the
like that.
basics for sale, the basics haven't changed, but I
Yeah,
think what changed is buyer behavior has changed.
yeah,
So, and we need to adapt as salespeople. We need to adapt to that. We
yeah,
can't just say, "Oh, darn, that's not the way it should be," but it is that way. So
yeah.
we need to be adaptive to it.
Well, I know you know Dale Carnegie. What do you think Dale Carnegie would say about what's going on now with
Well, Dale
AI?
Carnegie, yeah, again, he believed in positive mental attitude.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think everybody should read the old Dale Carnegie stories, and even though they happened 100 years ago, and
yeah,
it's probably when they did, it's still a lot of it is still very pertinent.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for bringing these timely insights on 2025 sales landscape. It's clear that with the right mindset, strategic use of technology, and a focus on overcoming obstacles, entrepreneurs have huge opportunity to grow profitably while enjoying more freedom. For those watching, don't forget to grab Steve's free guide. We'll have the link here and overcoming obstacles. Make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. It's sure to give you practical steps to start leveling up right away. And remember, the future is here. If you're willing to adapt and invest in your own development, success in 2025 and beyond is absolutely within reach. Steve, it's been a pleasure having you back. Thank you for helping us chart the path to greater sales success and truly freedom focused businesses.
You're welcome, Deb. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.